I'm Lia Mice. This is my studio in East London, and today we're talking about my track, Which Memories Will Make It. Okay, so as this track was made for my album, The Sampler is a Time Machine, and all the tracks are related to time travel and using the sampler to engage with concepts of time travel. I was reading a lot about different aspects of time travel, so these are some of the books that I was reading, and one aspect of time travel, aside from the physics sort of way or the sci-fi kind of way, is through our own memory and imagination. So I was reading this book on memory, and so that's what this track is about, is the ways that we actually use our minds to access memory and how a sampler uses its hard drives to access memory, and can we make the sampler do what the mind actually does. And the way the mind works is it changes the memory every time it accesses it. It doesn't actually access something that's locked away. It actually generates it, and each time it generates it differently. So the idea of the track was to make it roll around differently every single time it repeats, and gradually degenerate as well, because you're really overriding memories whenever you access them. So what I did when I was trying to make the track was I sort of came to a blank Ableton session and I made different chunks. So you can see it says part 1, round 1, round 2, round 3, so that every time it comes around it would be slightly different. And so I had the sort of concept first and then built the track around the concept, and the lyrics are all about how our memories change, and we can actually choose whether to keep our memories while we're sleeping or flush them away, and then when we wake up are we the same person. So yeah, I always start with the beat, and then I make some kind of weird synthy kind of sounds, and then, as the album is all about playing with samplers, once I had that beginning of tracks, I then put things into the samplers and also made the beats again out of my analog rhythm. Or the sampler I was using was the Octatrack. And yeah, but very first thing I started was with Ableton, and when I use live, I use a push just to get ideas down really quickly. So the first thing I would have done was the beat. So I can maybe solo the beat. The kick I made out of it looks like 3 kicks kind of all on top of each other. They're exactly the same beat, but they're just to make it thicker. So if I can solo the kick, that's this one plus that one plus that one. So that's how I got the kick to be so chunky. And then that's the snare. The snare's equally made up with, at the moment, 3 snares, but later when I go across to Logic, that's when I also put in more drum beats with the analog rhythm. But yeah, so every single sound is sort of made up by multiple samples all put together, some of which I've recorded myself and some of which are from sample packs. But when I sample, I don't sample off records, I use sample packs or my own recordings in the studio. And there's a cymbal in this track that was a real cymbal that I recorded in the studio, so that's this. So I think when that comes up, it's it sort of pokes out because it's really quite obviously a real cymbal. But yeah, there's the bass is made by this instrument called the gong bass. One of the synths is called the South Pacific Pad. And like I use these MIDI sounds because they are just a really fast way to like get an idea down, and then later if I think it needs fixing, I'll get another synth and play that part. But for me, just to get the parts down really quickly is why for synths I don't really have any hardware synths. But then there's this one that is like super fast. So the way that I made that is I just played that part and then EQ'd it, just like made it just the mids here, and then I added Echo Boy. Should we look at what that is? Analog chorus, and then I would have tweaked like that. But what I usually do is because Soundtoys has really good presets, I just like find a preset or I'll scroll the presets and then I'll tweak them. So yeah, that's how I made that part. And that repeats through. And then, what's this? I really like that sound. That's called Voice Layered ENS. So it's some sample that I found in a sample pack and just made some strange rhythm of it playing and then playing an octave higher, which is just incredibly high, like a kind of dog's hearing level. But like that would have been to poke through the track, because at that point, like it's just kind of coming through at a frequency that nothing else is there. So I like, let's just look at almost everything on this track probably has Echo Boy on it. No, EQ, everything will have some EQ on it. And I do that to like clear out, like I would have done this to clear out a space for the kick there. I like to do like hard shelves. But Echo Boy is on a lot of this track and a lot of this whole album because I just think it's really nice. And I just, like I said, I would pick a different preset that sort of works. So this one, this is the backing vocal and it's CHRS flange delay. Okay, so let's listen to that. This is the backing vocal. It's just me saying now, but then it's just looped and cut up and put into different beats, and then with different echo on each. Nope, it's the same echo on each. But yeah, I think this echo ping pongs. No. So yeah, so that's underneath the whole track, is underneath the whole, not the whole track. In sections there is a backing vocal of me saying now, 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 now. And that, I'll just play a bit where of it solid and then I'll unsolo it. So it's like, sort of takes the place of a synth there, but that's my voice saying now. And I guess that's another time travel concept, because the way that the mind recognizes the present moment is it's generated as well, similar to memories, because we see the present moment with our eyes or feel it with our senses, but there's a latency for when our brain perceives what we've actually sensed. And so between the latency, like because of that latency, what are we kind of perceiving in the middle? That's a generated image of what it's expecting. So basically, if we add up all of our now moments, there's no now. Like, we're always a series of things that we're expecting the world to be. So in a sense, that speaks to the sampler, because there's no song. You press play on a sampler and there's just sample, 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 sample. And it's not a song as a whole, and it's accessing memories and things like that. So yeah, that made it into the track. I don't know what this is. That is a synth part that has been like mangled through the Octatrack and then put back in and then cut up. Like, you can see all the cuts here where I've faded. So what I like to do is I use the timeline to sample and cut, as well as I'll use a hardware sampler to sample and cut. And that all of my tracks, like, there's always just countless tracks of just cut, like things are cut and fade. And yeah. So having made this grid to begin with of the different rounds, that's the parts where I chose where, as the track went along, where things would come in or go out. So you can see where it's sort of more like a guideline for the arrangement of the track. So you can see in this thing, the second round is where I really made these now vocals go intense, but I removed the cymbal. And in the third round is like this thing comes in, which wasn't in the bit before. So this bit is, it's a sample, an audio sample called Muted Guitar, and then I played the parts of it, and then it's got like a loop time on it for like repeating the sort of tone. So yeah. But what we're looking at is like, when I have the foundation, like, I'll come up with one bit of a track in a day, so maybe like a beat and then a sort of initial synth parts. But I won't even work on it again if I don't think it's cool. And then, but if I do work on it again, I'll like obsess over it for about 20 sessions. And I know, because I kept a file of how many sessions I went back to each track on, and it worked out to somewhere between 15 and 20 per track on my album. So yeah, that would have come out of, you know, a session. I would have developed that thing, but then I might have been working on heaps of other synth things, and they just would have gotten deleted, or they'll end up on an earlier version. So what we're looking at here is there's like older versions of vocals on this, which didn't make it onto the album, because after I exported this and put it all over on my samplers, then I redid the vocals that had the lyrics that were related to the title, which is Which Memories Will Make It. So yeah, so this is the music part, and then what I did then is I bounced these out as stems and put them into my Octatrack, and I sort of rebuilt the beat as well in the analog rhythm. And then I was trying to mess with the samplers to change those beats a lot more. And then when I did that, I recorded the tracks as audio files through the Zoom, and then into a Logic file, because I sort of mix between whether I'm using Ableton Live or Logic. Having made the, I guess, foundation of what I wanted to build on to be the track, I bounced them out to stems, and then I put them into my Octatrack. And I also rebuilt the beat from scratch in my analog rhythm. And to do that, it was like, I just really wanted to make sure that I was making the most interesting drum sounds. So if I had a hi-hat or something in the other version, because like I said, I used that live version to just get the idea down as quickly as possible without obsessing over sound, so that I was like, okay, I'm sure this is a good track that I want to work on. Then I use the analog rhythm to obsess over like tiny tweaks in the sound. It's really good drum machine for that. And then I like to do that and sort of have a live jam with the elements using both the Octatrack and the analog rhythm. And so that's why I have this Zoom L12, is because it has like 12 inputs. So I can literally get every channel off of, like I can get 4 outs from the Octatrack, and I can get like 8 outs from the analog rhythm. So I can get everything on its own track, because that's something that I also like to do for the mixdown, is have every single element on its own track, so that I can have full control over the EQ and the effects and everything. So yeah, I'd do a live jam, and then I would cut that live jam up into the Logic file. So that's why on this Logic file you've got, this would be the kick condensed down from the earlier one, which was made up of 3 kicks. But then you'd have this thing called AR kick, that's the analog rhythm kick, which it looks like in the end I didn't, oh no, yeah, I did use the rhythm kick here. I used this one, so I did a different one. And then it seems like I've joined it together with the original kick anyway, so, oh no, it's muted. Maybe not, no, this one. I can't remember how to, but anyway. So then the kick is like even more, I don't know, perfected than the other version. And then I re-recorded my vocals. I always record 3 versions of my top vocals and 3 versions of my harmony vocals, and blend them together. I'll have 1 as the loudest and then 2 kind of docked. And generally I sing the harmonies instead of pitching them up. Like say I've got a harmony that's like 5 semitones pitched up, I'll sing it 5 semitones pitched up rather than pitch it up. But live I use vocal effects to do that. Yeah, so here I've got the hi-hats from the analog rhythm that I like. I just think it's really good at making crispy sounds. And that's a different beat than was in the other one too, so I've probably just jammed around on the analog rhythm and come up with that beat. But yeah, there's so many things muted because it's things that I've tried and it's like, that's cool, but the other thing was cooler. Or I try it and the next time I do it better. There's a lot going on in that tom sound. So that's just from the rhythm, so that's pretty cool. And then, what's this? Oh no, don't record. Which memories will make it? So that's, I've like made these tiny little cuts and reversed tiny little bits of my voice there to make it sound really like it's getting a little bit mangled or a little bit chewed up. And that was like reacting to the concept of your memory changing things every time it accesses it. So when that sample comes through of my voice, then I manually cut it up again, so I'm never going to get it exactly the same. And So that's sort of like, I'll try to find that spot if I just unmute it. That's sort of just hanging around underneath the song. Yeah, so again, that's using the voice in place of maybe you would use a synth to do, or a pad to do something like that. But yeah, I used my voice to do that. And as the song goes on, I did, like in the outro of the song, there's just a really long bit with, it's getting more and more distorted and more cut up. So that's how I did it. I did all of these manual cuts of bits that I had recorded back in and used like distortion effects in the in the Electron Octatrack. Yeah, that's how I got that ending to be all jumbled up. Which memories were made? Yeah, but other than that, a lot of it is the same elements from my first draft. I've just gone deeper into the those little tiny kind of production details. So in my production kind of toolkit is my tape machine, and it's an 8-track Fostex tape machine. And I use that, sometimes I do experiments where I do tape looping, and other times I'll use it not as a compositional tool, but more of like a, I use it like a compressor. I'll like bounce my drum tracks off of it and try to get them, like, even though I love to keep every drum track separate, if I put many of them through the tape machine at once, it has to fight for the space on the tape, so it kind of like makes it sit in a really nice, tough way. And yeah, I guess instead of using the tape machine for this track, I used that digital cut-up technique just because I wanted to, I guess I wanted it to be like talking about the sampler in a digital way. But I could have, I guess, done a sort of disintegration like through using the tape machine. But in some ways, what I'm doing with these ideas where I'm building a track off of a concept or like a thing I've read, is I'm pushing myself outside of the box of production techniques I may have already had. So if I've already tried doing tape disintegration, then I'm not going to try it on this track. On this track, I'll try to disintegrate the track using something else. So like, okay, the distortion on the Octatrack, or physically cutting it up and reversing bits and making it lose time through like getting it off the grid when I'm looping it and things like that. That's where I went with this rather than using the tape machine. So that's how I made parts of this track. You can hear the whole track on my album, The Sampler as a Time Machine, and it's on Optima Music.